Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. This is our Ohio State against Tennessee recap. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and joined with me is Joe Meade. And Joe, the Buckeyes take care of business, 42-17. A great start from the Buckeyes. That's exactly what we asked for from them, and they end up putting down a pretty good Tennessee team. But Joe, all of the noise coming into this game about Ryan Day, about Will Howard, about the entire Ohio State Buckeyes team, it's pretty clear that they showed up ready to play, and they took down what was a pretty good Tennessee team this year.
Yeah, Sean, I think this was by far Ohio State's best performance of the year. I don't think anyone's going to really dispute that. I think even offensively, if you want to say some portions of the Oregon game were better, I mean, maybe, but I think their game plan on offense, and frankly, I'm not going to discredit anything Ohio State did. I think how they responded after that loss to Michigan and how they really didn't even let Tennessee breathe at all. I mean, first drive, go right down there. It looked like Ohio State, like when they went up 7-0 like that, it kind of looked like the 2021 Michigan State Ohio State game. It was as if Tennessee didn't even have a chance to stop them. I mean, they slowed down a bit at the end of the first quarter, and Tennessee got a touchdown on a pretty fortunate call on the roughing the passer. I think even Tennessee fans would admit that's fair. But everything coming into this game, Tennessee's going to take over the stadium, and they did a pretty good job of it, I will say. For a bunch of SEC fans who allegedly don't like the cold, I thought they did a great job of that. But that's probably the only thing they won because aside from the coin toss, they they got their tail ends handed to them. There's no if, ands, or what's about it. And by the second quarter, you could see videos of this. Tennessee fans were clearing out. They just knew their team was in trouble, and Ohio State, aside from the 10 points they let up unanswered at the end of the first half, that was probably the worst portion of football they played. They were in the backfield. They knew Nico would look at one read, and then he immediately tried to scramble. I'm sure he got like a few pretty good scrambles, but nothing that was over 10 yards. He had 4 or 5 yards on third and long that really didn't matter. And Ohio State, Jim Knowles, Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, probably their best game plan all year. They just got those guys in space. And Tennessee's defensive game plan was terrible. I mean, playing man, not doing anything complex. Every time Ryan Day plays against the defense that, sticks to their guns and doesn't adjust and really doesn't, and whether that was when he was an offensive coordinator with Urban Meyer to now, any defense that's not complex, he tears apart. And that's all I would define this game as. I'm probably going to forget the intimate details of this game. All I remember is Jeremiah Smith, the 2 TDs, and Ohio State's receivers like streaking open down the field. Even some Will Howard didn't see based on the highlights.
And Joe, this is one where a lot of questions will be asked after the game. Where was this against Michigan? If they played like this against Michigan, they're winning by 40.
They're winning by 70.
They this is what we asked them to do. We asked them coming into this game, if you want to win, if you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of your fans, you have to throw the first punch. You have to throw everything all in at the beginning. And that's pretty much what they did. That first possession, Joe, they took some deep shots like we asked for. They end up connecting on one of them for a Jeremiah Smith TD. And then after that, it just seemed like they were one step ahead. Will Howard had a really nice game, but Joe, I don't think he really did anything like crazy different than what he's capable of. He took the open man, he made the throws. They get the running backs going with some outside carries, not just up the middle against elite defensive line. I think it could have been a little shaky had Tennessee started the second half with a touchdown. They could have made it 21-17 or 18 had they gone for two, but they stopped them. They go down and score, and then when it's 28-10, that's it. They end up putting a couple more touchdowns in there, and they make Kamaliava really work. I mean, he had some nice carries, but he got hit hard a lot. And Joe, they get the rematch that they've wanted since that game in Eugene in October. Ohio State will face Oregon in the Rose Bowl for a chance to go to the final. And Joe, this Ohio State team against Tennessee, I'm not sure that any team can beat that Ohio State performance, especially on a neutral.
Absolutely. And they took advantage of everything Tennessee did wrong. people, the SMU game could say on that fourth down where Jennings threw to Matt Himner instead of rushing it, oh, if that was converted, the game's different. Oh, if the face mask wasn't called, that's different. Sure, I could understand that argument. But at the end of the day, Ohio State, every time Tennessee gave them a chance, they took it. I can't recall one time Tennessee made a mistake and Ohio State didn't take full advantage of it.
Yeah.
And that's what really.
If there was a holding penalty, the drive was over. They didn't let them, once they got off schedule, they took advantage, and then they offensively they could have scored more, Joe. They got 42 with 11 minutes left.
Yeah, 1,000%. And all these receivers in space, I don't know how you stop that. If they're in space, all Will Howard has to do is make a pretty pedestrian throw by his standards. I'm not even saying, I think by the way, he played great. I'm not criticizing him at all.
But they were open.
Yeah, they were wide open. And that's a throw as Kyle McCord made last year. And it really makes you question. And I know a lot of Ohio State fans are still not totally happy. I'm sure they're happy with the performance, but not totally happy still with the loss to Michigan. It really makes you question what the heck they were doing. It actually makes probably that Michigan loss look even worse, if that even makes sense.
No, I don't think Ohio State fans were all that confident coming into this game.
No,
I don't know if they thought that their team was capable of that after a loss to your rival, but they were.
And we'll preview the Oregon game later, but I think a lot of people expect that game, kind of like the first one, to be somewhat of a firefight. I think the performance the offense put on, particularly Will Howard and Travion Henderson, that was probably his best game as a Buckeye this year. I'm not going to say overall. I think some of his early performances his freshman year and even some last year were even better. But to have those kind of performances from probably your running back, and really your most relied on running back. I know Quinshon Judkins is probably better by a lot of people's metrics and standards. I think Travion Henderson's the heart of that offense. I think Will Howard's still a newbie and whatnot. Getting off that rant, though, Sean, if you want to have a performance that preps you for a shootout, that's the kind of performance you'd want. So I definitely think Oregon, I think it helps both teams that they played each other. I do think it's still a little different. I'm not going to go on too big about this because that will probably be our longest preview episode. But Ohio State's O-line, that's a great way to be confident. I think they had a few letdowns at the beginning, but they really eased into it, and I think they played a lot looser when they had that lead. So really good on them, but the keys, spoiler alert, are going to remain the same for Ohio State in that Oregon game, especially because Oregon's not going to make the same mistakes Tennessee did. I think that's not a guarantee that's going to shock a lot of people.
And, Joe, this was one, again, that I don't think the mental side of it can be understated. We talked about how if they win this, they might win it all.
Yeah.
They got over this hump. Now, if they were to lose to Oregon, I think Ohio State fans will still call this year a failure, but you're still alive in the Final Eight. Despite losing to your rival, despite losing to Oregon by 1 point in a game where if you had one more second, you could have kicked a game-winning field goal. And I believe that they missed a field goal earlier in that game, too.
That's the one thing I'm going to highlight, Sean, because I think I've been nothing but complimentary. I think the special teams is still a big concern. I think Jaden Fielding, he's been money all year. He was 9 of 10 before the Michigan game, but he doesn't have a big leg as displayed because it wasn't even close, let alone on track. But I think if I had anything to be concerned about by Ohio State, it'd be that and the big play potential because Tennessee really had no shot at those. But Oregon, if you watch them all year, every play there's a chance Dylan Gabriel could go long. So,
yeah. So, Joe, Ohio State was, the pro SEC biased people are getting a little bit quiet here after Tennessee was humbled by Ohio State. But, Joe, Ohio State wins 42-17 in a game that was by far the most impressive performance of the year for the Buckeyes. Ohio State will advance to play Oregon in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into this recap. Please check out the other ones if you haven't already, and be sure to look out for the previews as we get closer to the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.